The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, casting long shadows across the sleek Manhattan office. Mallory, my boss, had insisted we stay to finalize the quarterly report, but as the rest of the team left hours ago, the air between us grew thick with something unspoken. "Quinn, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice breaking the silence like a thunderclap, her eyes meeting mine with a vulnerability I'd never seen in the formidable executive who ran our marketing firm with iron precision. That single sentence changed everything. I had admired Mallory from afar for years, the way she commanded respect in boardrooms while hiding a warmth only I seemed to notice during late projects. But this was different. She confessed her feelings, how the late nights had built something deeper, something she could no longer ignore. And when I admitted I felt the same, our lips met in a soft tentative kiss that sealed our fate. We agreed to keep it secret to protect our careers in this cutthroat industry. Little did we know that decision would soon become our undoing as crises loomed on the horizon. The office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, the kind of scent that clung to you after 14-hour days at Sterling and Voss. I was 28, fresh out of the Midwest with a graphic design degree, and a mountain of student loans that made this junior account manager role feel like a lifeline. Mallory, at 42, was the senior director, who had built the firm's biggest accounts from nothing. She was divorced with 2 teenagers who lived with their dad in Connecticut, and she carried herself like someone who had already survived worse than corporate politics. That night we had been polishing the campaign for Apex Pharma, their biggest client yet. The deadline was brutal and the rest of the team had bailed at 8, citing family obligations or sheer exhaustion. Mallory had looked at me across the conference table and said, "Stay, Quinn. We finished this together." I stayed because I always did. Because her approval meant everything. We worked in silence at first, clicking through slides, tweaking copy and visuals until the numbers blurred. Then she set her laptop aside, poured 2 glasses of the cheap bourbon she kept in her drawer for exactly these nights, and started talking. Not about work but about her. How the divorce had left her hollow, how raising kids while climbing the ladder had taught her to hide every real emotion. How she had watched me for months, the quiet way I handled pressure, the spark in my ideas that no one else noticed. "You're the only person who makes this job feel human," she said, her voice low. I told her about my own loneliness, the string of failed dates back home, the fear that coming to New York had been a mistake. The words tumbled out easier than they ever had with anyone else. When she reached across the desk and took my hand, the touch felt electric. Neither of us pulled away. The kiss, when it happened, was gentle, almost reverent, like we both knew we were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Afterward we sat there breathing hard, promising each other it would stay between us. "No one can know," Mallory whispered. "Not the firm, not the clients, not even our families." I nodded, already feeling the weight of that promise settle on my chest like a stone. We left the office at 1:30 in the morning, the streets of Midtown empty and glistening with rain. In the elevator she brushed a strand of hair from my face, and for one fleeting moment everything felt possible. By the time I reached my tiny Brooklyn apartment, the reality had already started creeping in. What had we just done? And how long could we keep it hidden before the world demanded answers? The next morning at the office, nothing looked different on the surface. Mallory was her usual sharp self, leading the 9 o'clock briefing with crisp efficiency. I sat 3 seats away taking notes, pretending the memory of her lips didn't still burn on mine. But inside everything had shifted. We stole glances across the conference room, small smiles when no one was looking. By lunch she texted me from her office, "Meet me at the usual bench in Bryant Park after work?" It was our first real step into whatever this was. I went. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, the pressure of the Apex account, the way the industry chewed people up. She told me about the custody battles with her ex, how her kids barely spoke to her anymore. I shared stories of my parents back in Ohio who still didn't understand why I had moved so far away. When she walked me to the subway that night, our hands brushed and the spark was still there, stronger than before. For 2 weeks we lived like that, secret meetings, quiet dinners, and out-of-the-way restaurants, walks through Central Park where we could pretend we were just 2 friends. The happiness was real, the kind that made the long days bearable. But beneath it all, the first cracks were already forming. The Apex report we had finalized that night had a tiny error buried in the financial projections. Nothing major at first. Just a miscalculated growth estimate. The client hadn't noticed yet, but the internal audit team was already circling. Mallory mentioned it casually over coffee one morning. "They're asking questions about the late revisions. We need to be careful, Quinn." I nodded, not realizing how careful we would soon have to be. That night in the office had been the beginning. Now the consequences were quietly gathering like storm clouds on the horizon, ready to break over us both. The weeks that followed felt like living in two worlds at once. At Sterling and Voss, we were the model professionals, Mallory, the unflappable leader, me, the reliable junior who always delivered. Behind closed doors or in stolen moments outside the building, we were something else entirely, two women falling deeper into a connection that made every ordinary day feel electric. The happiness was the kind I had only read about in books, the quiet certainty that someone truly saw you. We met at hidden spots around the city, a bookstore in the village where she bought me poetry collections, a rooftop bar in Queens where the city lights stretched out like stars. One Saturday we drove upstate to a small apple orchard outside the city limits. No one knew us there. Mallory wore jeans and a simple sweater, her usual power suits left behind. We walked between the trees picking fruit, laughing about nothing important. When she pulled me close under the autumn leaves and kissed me softly, the world narrowed to just us. "This is what I want, Quinn," she whispered. "You. Even if we have to hide it for now." I believed her completely. The romance felt pure, real, the kind that healed old wounds instead of creating new ones. Back in the city we kept our promise: no public displays, no risky office encounters. But the late nights we once used for work became excuses for longer conversations on the phone, her voice the last thing I heard before sleep. Meanwhile, the Apex Pharma account was heating up. The client had launched the campaign and early numbers looked strong, but whispers started circulating in the firm. The audit team had flagged the projection error from that midnight session. It wasn't catastrophic yet, just enough to delay a bonus payout and make the partners nervous. Mallory handled it with her usual grace, calling extra meetings, reassuring everyone the fix was simple. I helped revise the documents, staying late again, but this time alone in my cubicle, while she attended a client dinner. We texted constantly, little messages that kept the connection alive without raising suspicion. "Thinking of the orchard," she wrote one evening. I smiled at my screen, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Our relationship was strengthening even as the professional pressure mounted. I started noticing small changes in myself: more confident in meetings, more willing to speak up, because I knew she believed in me. Mallory seemed lighter too, her laughs came easier when we were alone. She told me about her kids, Emma and Tyler, how she hoped one day to introduce me not as her employee but as someone important. The dream felt close enough to touch. But the first real warning sign came on a Tuesday afternoon. A senior partner pulled Mallory into his office for a closed-door meeting that lasted over an hour. When she emerged, her face was tight, the lines around her eyes deeper than usual. Later in the copy room she whispered, "They're digging into the report revisions. Someone mentioned we were here alone that night. It's nothing yet, but we have to stay ahead of it." My stomach dropped. We had been so careful. That night we met at a quiet diner in Hell's Kitchen, picking at plates of food neither of us really wanted. She reached across the table under the booth where no one could see and squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, we protect each other," she said. I nodded, but the words felt heavier now. The happiness we had built was still there, bright and real, but the shadows of the office were lengthening. Outside the diner the city hummed with its usual chaos: taxis honking, pedestrians rushing by. Inside my head the questions started multiplying. How long could we keep this up? And what would happen when the firm demanded answers we couldn't give without exposing everything? By the end of the month the client had noticed the discrepancy. Apex Pharma's legal team sent a formal letter questioning the projections, demanding a full explanation, and threatening to pull future business. The partners called an emergency all-hands meeting. Mallory stood at the front of the room, calm and commanding, explaining the error as a minor oversight that had already been corrected. I sat in the back taking notes, my heart pounding, because I knew I had been the one who entered the final numbers that night. After the meeting she pulled me aside in the hallway, her voice low. "They're forming a review committee. You and I will both be interviewed. Stick to the story. We worked late on legitimate business. Nothing more." I agreed, but the fear was settling in now, a cold knot in my gut. That weekend we escaped to a bed and breakfast in the Hudson Valley, pretending for 2 days that we were just any couple on vacation. We hiked, talked about the future, laughed until our sides hurt. In those moments the crisis felt distant. But Monday morning brought us back to reality, the review committee emails already waiting in our inboxes. The happy bubble we had floated in was starting to strain under the weight of what was coming. The review committee turned out to be more than just a formality. 3 partners, 2 external auditors, and the head of HR sat around the long mahogany table in the executive conference room, asking questions that felt less like fact-finding and more like an interrogation. Mallory went first, her posture perfect, her answers precise. She described the late night as standard procedure for a high-stakes deadline, nothing unusual. When they asked about the projection error, she took responsibility as the senior director, saying she had signed off on the final version. I listened from the waiting area outside, my palms sweaty. When it was my turn, the questions came faster. Had I noticed the discrepancy? Why had we stayed so late alone? Was there any outside influence? I stuck to the script we had rehearsed, but the auditor's eyes lingered a little too long, as if they sensed there was more to the story. The meeting ended with a warning that Apex Pharma was now threatening a full lawsuit for alleged negligence. The firm's stock had already dipped 2 points on the news. Back in my cubicle, I felt the walls closing in. Mallory texted me later, "We handled it. Breathe. Tonight at my place." I went because I needed her reassurance more than air. Her apartment in Tribeca was a sleek loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. We ordered Thai food and sat on the couch talking through every detail of the interviews. She was worried not for herself but for me. "If this escalates, they might look at our communication logs," she said. "We delete nothing, but we stay smart." The conversation shifted to us the way it always did when we were alone. She pulled me close and we shared a quiet moment of comfort, the kind that reminded me why we had risked everything. The happiness was still there, stubborn and bright, even as the storm gathered. But the next morning the email hit every inbox. Apex Pharma had filed the lawsuit naming Sterling and Voss, and specifically citing the report we had finalized that night. The partners called another emergency meeting. This time the tone was different, accusations flying about accountability. Mallory defended the team, but the partners wanted scapegoats. Rumors started swirling in the break room, whispers about that late night, and how 2 women alone might have been distracted. No one said it outright yet, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. The media caught wind faster than I expected. A small business blog first, then a major finance site ran the headline, "Sterling and Voss faces $1 million lawsuit over botched pharma campaign." They didn't mention us by name, but the details were too specific. Someone inside had leaked. Mallory and I met in the stairwell during lunch, her face pale. "This is getting bigger than us," she said. "The partners are talking about settlements. If they throw us under the bus to save the firm." She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what it meant. That evening we walked along the Brooklyn Heights promenade, the city lights reflecting on the water. She held my hand openly for the first time in public because the risk already felt inevitable. "Whatever they do to me, Quinn, I won't let them touch you," she promised. I wanted to believe her, but the pressure was mounting from every direction. My phone had started buzzing with calls from old colleagues asking if the rumors were true. Her ex had texted demanding to know if the lawsuit would affect child support. The happy moments we carved out felt smaller now, squeezed between emergency calls and strategy sessions. The crisis was no longer a distant threat. It was here, tightening around us like a noose, and every decision we made from now on would decide whether we survived together or fell apart alone. The scandal exploded on a Wednesday morning, when a tabloid site published the first photos. Someone had snapped us on the promenade that night, hands linked, heads close. The headline screamed, "Female exec and junior employee at center of Sterling and Voss lawsuit scandal, secret romance suspected." Within hours every major outlet picked it up. Our faces were blurred, but the names weren't. Mallory, Sterling and Voss director, and Quinn Ellis, account manager. The comments sections filled with venom speculation about how our personal involvement had caused the error. Stock plunged another 5%. The partners summoned us both to a closed board meeting that afternoon. The room felt like a courtroom. They demanded explanations. Mallory stood tall, admitting the relationship, but insisting it had no bearing on the work. I backed her up, my voice steadier than I felt. The partners weren't buying it. They talked about company policy against fraternization, the potential conflict of interest, the damage to reputation. By the end of the meeting we were both placed on administrative leave pending investigation. "This isn't personal," the CEO said, but his eyes told a different story. Outside the building reporters waited, cameras flashing. We pushed through them together, the questions flying like knives. How long has the affair been going on? Did the romance cause the client loss? Mallory shielded me with her body, her arm around my shoulders as we reached a cab. The media storm didn't stop. Nightly segments on cable news dissected our lesbian office romance, as if it were the crime of the century. Old photos from company events resurfaced, twisted into evidence. My parents called from Ohio, their voices shaking with disappointment and confusion. "We raised you better than this, Quinn," my mother said. "Deny it before it ruins your life." Mallory's ex was worse, filing an emergency motion to limit her custody time, claiming the scandal created an unstable environment for the kids. The pressure from every side was suffocating. We holed up in her apartment for days, ordering food in and watching the coverage like a horror movie we couldn't turn off. In the quiet moments we clung to each other, the romance that had once felt like freedom now our only anchor. She would trace patterns on my arm and whisper, "We didn't do anything wrong. Love isn't the crime here." But the world disagreed. The lawsuit grew teeth. Apex Pharma added claims of intentional negligence, now seeking punitive damages. The firm issued a statement distancing itself from us both. Friends stopped answering texts. The isolation was brutal. Yet in the middle of the chaos we faced the first real choice. The lawyers wanted us to sign affidavits denying any romantic involvement, claiming it was a misunderstanding. Mallory looked at me across the kitchen table, her eyes searching. "If we lie, we might save our jobs," she said. "But if we tell the truth, we lose everything else." The decision that night in the office had led us here. Now another decision loomed, bigger and more final. We chose truth. We chose each other. And with that choice, the full weight of the consequences crashed down. The affidavits we refused to sign triggered the next wave. The firm terminated us both for cause, citing policy violations and potential liability in the lawsuit. Severance was minimal, just enough to cover a few months. The media frenzy intensified with headlines about the lesbian boss-employee affair that sank a Wall Street firm. Protesters gathered outside the office, some supporting us, some hurling slurs. My family cut off contact completely. My father's last message, a single line: "Until you fix this, don't call." Mallory's teenagers refused to see her, the custody battle turning vicious. We moved into a small sublet in Queens, pooling what little savings we had left. The days blurred into strategy sessions with our own lawyer, who warned us the lawsuit could drag on for years. Apex Pharma offered a settlement if we admitted fault and signed non-disclosure agreements, but it required us to publicly deny our relationship. Again, the choice stared us down: protect our finances or protect our truth. Mallory paced the tiny living room, her voice raw. "I built my career from nothing, Quinn. If I take the blame alone, maybe you can salvage something." I refused. We stand together or we don't stand at all. The confrontation with our families came next. My parents flew in, demanding a meeting at a neutral coffee shop. They begged me to denounce Mallory, claim it was a phase, a mistake caused by work stress. When I refused, my mother cried. My father walked out. Mallory's ex showed up at our door with lawyers threatening to expose more if she didn't concede on custody. The pressure was relentless, every decision feeling like choosing which part of our lives to sacrifice. Through it all, our bond held. We cooked simple meals together, took long walks in the park where the city noise drowned out the headlines. The romantic moments were quieter now, but deeper, forged in fire. She would hold me at night and say, "This is the real test, Quinn. Not the office, not the lawsuit, but whether we choose each other when everything else is gone." I chose her every time. The court date for the preliminary hearing approached. Our lawyer advised separate testimonies to minimize damage, but we insisted on appearing together. The judge looked at us with something like pity when we entered the courtroom. Apex Pharma's team painted us as reckless and unprofessional. Our side argued the error was minor, the relationship irrelevant. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. We walked out hand in hand, facing the flashes. The public split into camps, some calling us brave, others demanding accountability. The strain was breaking us in small ways: sleepless nights, arguments over money, fears about the future. Yet every time we reached the edge, one of us would pull the other back. The price of courage was clear now: lost careers, damaged families, public humiliation. The price of silence would have been our souls. We paid the first price. And we kept paying. The final hearing lasted 3 grueling days. We sat side by side in the courtroom, our hands hidden beneath the table for strength. Apex Pharma's lawyers hammered at our credibility, bringing in former colleagues who testified about the late night and the unprofessional atmosphere. The partners from Sterling and Voss appeared remotely, throwing us under the bus to protect the firm's settlement. When it was our turn, Mallory spoke first, her voice steady as she detailed every decision we had made, including the choice to be honest. I followed, describing the error as human, not malicious, emphasizing that our relationship had never interfered with the work. The judge listened impassively. Outside, the media waited like vultures. When the ruling came, it was mixed. The firm settled with Apex for a reduced amount, but our personal liability was dismissed. We were free from the lawsuit, but the damage was permanent. No major firm would touch us now. Our reputations were scorched. We walked out of the courthouse into a light rain, the city indifferent as always. Mallory turned to me, her eyes shining with exhaustion and something like peace. We survived, Quinn. Not the way we wanted, but we survived together. We found new jobs, eventually smaller agencies where our story was old news. The family slowly softened, my parents sending tentative texts, Mallory's kids agreeing to weekend visits under supervision. The life we built was smaller, quieter, but undeniably ours. The romantic happiness that started in that midnight office had endured through every storm, proving stronger than the scandals and the silence ever could have been. Yet as we sat on our new balcony overlooking a quieter street in Queens years later, the question still lingered between us. Was choosing to fight for our love the right decision, even when it cost us everything we had built, or would silence and separation have been the wiser path to preserve our careers and our families?